So what we're going to do now is resolve this particular problem so that we can go and fetch an activity from our API. And what we'll do is we'll head back to VS Code. And first of all, we need to create a new method to load an activity, and we'll do that in our activity store. And inside our activity store, just below the load activities, I'm just going to add another action. And I'm just going to call this one load activity. And this is going to be an async method, and it's going to take an ID as a parameter, which is going to be a string. And let's have a think about what we want to do inside here. Now there's two scenarios we want to accommodate. First of all, the user clicks on the... Let's just go back and explain what I'm talking about. There's the two scenarios we want to cover. First of all, when the user clicks on this particular button. Now, we've already got the activity in our activity registry. So we don't need to go to our API to go and get this if we've already got it from this particular location. Now, the other scenario we need to cover is if the user clicks on this particular link and then, for instance, saves this in their bookmarks, and they might try and browse to this page directly, or they might decide to just refresh the page. And we need to accommodate both of those scenarios. Now, if they refresh the page, that means we don't have anything in our activity registry, and we'll need to go out and get the activity we want to display on this page. So what we can do, and what I'm going to do is just create a little helper method in here called getActivity. And it doesn't need to be an action because we're not mutating states in this case. And what I'm going to do is just take an ID as a string. And inside here, I'm just going to return this.activityregistry.get and then pass in the ID. And inside my load activity method, I'm going to say let activity equals this.getActivity and pass in the ID. Now, our get methods, and the description of this is not great, so let's go to the documentation for the observable map to see what it returns in the case that we don't have a matching activity with that particular ID. And I'll just go to MobX observable map and just take a look at the documentation in this case. And what we want to do is take a look at the get method. And what this does, it returns the value at the given key, or it's going to be undefined. Okay, so if we go back, what we can do is check to see if we've got something in our activity, and this is either going to be an activity or it's going to be undefined. And we can say if activity, then we can say this.selected activity is equal to activity. And I need to make this an if-else statement actually, so I'm just going to add some brackets and paste in the selected activity. And in the else statement, we know that we don't have an activity in our registry. So we'll need to go out to our API and go and get this. So first of all, we'll set a loading indicator to true, and we can make use of our loading initial here because it's not going to clash with what we're doing inside our activity list because we're going to be displaying the details of an activity separate now. So I'm going to say this.loading initial is equal to true. And then I'm going to add a try catch block. And I'll say catch and error. And I'll just console.log the error. And inside our try block, what we want to do, we want to say activity is equal to await agent.activities.details, one of our API methods we created earlier, and we'll pass in the ID. And then we can set our selected activity to this activity. So we'll add a run-in action here, and we'll give it a name and just say getting activity. And in the callback, we'll say this.selected activity is equal to activity, and we'll say list.loading initial is equal to false, and in the error, again, we'll use the runIn action and give this a name of getActivityError. And inside here, we'll just say this.loadingInitial is equal to false. Now, what I'm also going to do is, I'm not particularly happy with this being called selected activity anymore. I'd much prefer this just to be called activity. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to update the selected activity in here and call it activity. And then I'm just going to update all of the usages inside here of selected activity and just change them to activity. And we've also used it in our edit activity as well, so let's update this. And also in our open create form, open edit form, cancel selected activity, all of these are going to be removed soon, but just so that we get past the errors, I'm just going to update all of these. And also for the select activity. I know we're not using these anymore, but just to keep moving forward and make sure that we remove any errors, I'm just updating those for the time being. And when we look at the cleanup for this section, we'll remove all of these unused methods. What we'll also find after making the change to selected activity to just activity is that our components that are referencing selected activity are also going to have errors. So if we just go to the browser, we'll just go through and clean up all of these particular activities as well. And the first error we see is that the property selected activity does not exist on type activity store, but this one is coming from our activity store itself. And this one, if we go and take a look at this, well, this activity does exist. So I'm presuming this is just a bug with a compiler. So I'm just going to restart this particular application just to make sure this is a genuine error and it persists. And sure enough, it's a different error now. And now we've moved on to the components. So if you do see something unexplainable, do please make sure that the unexplainable persists even after a restart of the application. And what we're seeing now is the error coming from our activity dashboard. And because we're using the activity store inside there, and we've brought in selected activity, we're just going to need to update these as well. So I'll head over to the activity dashboard. And we want to change this to activity. And do the same for the selected activity here, and here, and here, and here. And if we go across to our browser, we should move on to another error. And once again, we're running into this issue where it's not picked up our change here. So I'm just going to restart the server once again. And we should move on to a different error now. And sure, we've got the activity details, so I'm just going to update this as well. And go into the activity details component. And we're using selected activity here, but we're calling it something else. So we can just remove selected activity from this one. And let's go and take a look. And now we're back to our original error of cannot read property category of undefined. Okay, so what we'll do next is we'll take a look at using our root parameters here and see how we can pass that to our load activity method. And we'll take a look at that next.